Hey everyone, John Henry here, slingshotfutures.com, and welcome to the Daily Futures Market Outlook, where we take a look at our big six markets and formulate an attack method for tomorrow's trading so we can approach it as prepared as possible. Tomorrow being the 24th, not the last week of the month, but we're getting there going into the weekend. Now, before we jump on into the charts, make sure to swing on over to slingshotfutures.com, scroll down if you haven't already, and join the Daily Outlook newsletter. This will add you to our email list so that you will be notified every single time one of these comes out. That way you're ahead of the curve whenever something new is coming out. And inside the newsletter, we also talk about not just the futures, but also stocks and different statistics and all kinds of cool stuff. Along with that, at the bottom of the page in our blog section, we talk about the market psychology of a specific market every single morning. Great little video to keep your eyes on, as well as different blog posts like the one yesterday going deeper into trading psychology, and the morning prep levels, which of course we post every single morning. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to go over and apply for the one-day trial that will log you into our live trade room so you can see what we're all about for a day, and after that you can subscribe for a longer period of time, or of course become a member, where the membership and the live trade room come together for one full And if you haven't done it already, make sure to swing on over to the live trade room subscription and trial info. You can sign up for a one-day trial to see what we're all about. And then from there, if you want, you can also sign up for a subscription to the live trade room, or of course, you can always become a member, where the live trade room comes as a package deal with membership as a whole. Now, looking at the markets, we have the Bund getting a little bit sideways still. We're not breaking out of yesterday's movement by very much. And if anything, putting in a lot of resistance at the highs, much more so than the lows. The lows at least are getting some continuation of the downside, but every time the buyers have tried to show up, they've been slapped right back down every single time. So given that, obviously, between 160.47 down to 160.41 is a major area of resistance, we also can see that, this breakdown, given the range so far, probably isn't going to stick. Now, we did just break below the lows, which had several low points in, and that's going to be at 160.11, and notice where we're turning around right now. We're getting kind of a retest of that earlier bottom of the range, so a lot of sellers may try to liquidate earlier positions and try to get in for another move down. That leg lower is breaking below rising support as well, so the sellers do have some argument here to try to take it lower. All in all, I'm anticipating buying pressure below, so I'm going to be looking to buy between 159.93 down to 88, and maybe even a little below for a head fake down here before a reversal back up. Generally, when we have ranges, we get a breakout of the range, and the market will want to come back in and continue its cycling. Now, we have been in this range in general for a couple days now after that big move that we had earlier in the week, and that may mean that we could be on the edge of a breakout either tomorrow or maybe going into Monday, depending on what all happens. Gold catching a pretty big overall move, but not a whole lot of distance in the end. We opened up right here, and we are going to be closing right around here. So not a whole lot of action when you look at a daily chart, just a huge doji, right? Now, a lot of that failure back and forth, we're seeing balance right in the middle. Pretty obvious to see here as well. The market is tending to want to go inside this middle area, and every time it gets away from it, it gets sucked right back down towards it or right back up towards it. And either way, we're kind of ending up in the middle. Now, the overall middle, generally, from the looks of it, it looks between about 48.5 down to 45.9. Seems to be kind of fair value, if you will, but we definitely have some extremes to work with as well. And given that we are kind of expanding those extremes, it does sort of look like the market may want to try to find a small little range. The lows at the bottom here being at 42.7 to 43.5, and the highs being 52.7 to 53.3. We are also putting in a possible wedge top, which may find a little bit of resistance or support depending on which way they approach it. But we're in a range, right? And with a range, I want to be buying low. We just came off of a sharp double bottom test at 42.7. What I would like to see is the market to come back down, pierce that low, and then fail right back up for buying pressure back up towards the highs. If in the overnight session this does continue back up towards the top, I would be looking for selling a resistance between 52.7 to 53.3. But we may also come into it a little bit earlier. The market got stuck right at the prior high of day from yesterday at 51.5, and it seems to have had a very strong rejection there. So as early as 51.5, depending on where the sellers want to begin scaling in for their move. But either way, we're in a range. Buy low, sell high. On the bonds, much more range bound. Of course, it is the bonds. We have a median range, or what, like we were just talking about, sort of fair market value between 150.23 and as low as 150.13, 14 in that area. But that said, we do have the extremes here as well. The extreme at the top being 150.31 up to 150.02, and the lows being 150.07 down to 150, right down here, 150.03. So we're kind of ping-ponging back and forth here, and definitely finding the market wanting to stay inside of this sort of band of median price. Every time we get away from it, comes right back. Get away from it, comes right back. So because of that, I would be looking for the extremes to be retested and a bounce right back up in, or an extreme test on the highs and a bounce right back in. At the moment, we're in the middle, so we have to wait for a little more action, but overall looking to buy low, sell high there as well. On crude oil, really nice drop after pretty much a range for most of the day. Things didn't really start kicking off till about 8:30, 9 o'clock. And even then, they only had that one big breakdown, and then it got really nasty again. So we're stuck in a wedge right now, having a really hard time getting continued price action. But we do have major downside objectives on that just massive push down, and that's going to be at 47.55. Sellers aren't done yet. They've got a little more room to go before they finish that objective lower. Now, given that we have such a strong bearish punch down, of course, I would love to see the buyers try to come back in, trap above the highs between 47.95 and 48.06, and then get dumped right back down to the lows. We may not get that opportunity given how bearish this is currently looking. We could even be forming a slightly steeper wedge to kind of work with here too. So if we find some support off of the bottom ledge of the wedge, the bottom edge of the wedge, sound like Dr. Seuss over here, could be looking for a quick little bounce, maybe a trap on the highs, and then finishing it off to the downside. Again, I would love to see it up here, but it doesn't look like we're going to get it. So still looking to finish off the objective to the downside though. We just need a good reason to jump in. On the Nasdaq, range bound here as well, in a very wide range, and the market seems to be finding balance between the highs of 53.76 and 3/4 down to 71.25, but also a lot of support and resistance and action around that 74.5 area. So those three levels seem to be about the big moving areas. And on the bottom edge, we have 51.25 down to 48.5, seeming to be about the major balance area on the lows. And we're just kind of bouncing around for right now. We're coming off of the lows, so I would love to become a buyer down here, given a good enough signal, and looking for a move at least halfway back into the range, right around that 53.60 half area. That's the prior month high as resistance, as well as last week's close at 53.63 half. So we do have some levels to look for, and I would love to be a buyer into those levels if we can get a proper signal. Still in a range though, looking to buy low, sell high, but over the past few days, it's hard to ignore the amount of movement that we've had, especially when you zoom out for the bears, right? Very difficult to not want to be a seller here on this drive lower, and this in a bigger picture is exactly where you want to see them come in for possible selling, right? You've got that big drive lower, you have the nice little wedge down after a spike. A lot of times they want to come back to the beginning of that area, and notice where we're finding a ton of resistance today. It's not a big surprise that the sellers may want to take this. So even though I do want to be a buyer down here for the short term, in the long term, it's really hard to ignore that bigger potential drop back down to those lows at 53.15. So definitely keep your eyes out and be a little bit cautious on the long side given the bigger picture. And the same thing goes for the S&P. If we zoom out, we can see that's exact same thing that we're looking at here on the S&P. Big dive lower, looking for a balance point right around that. And guess where we found balance today? Rejection heavily off of that area back down. And now we are at the bottom of the range lows, and the range lows do look pretty good from 42 down to 39.75. But again, if the buyers can't get things going soon, we may find the sellers in the longer term picture trying to drive that move down and get that major push down to that 32.25 area once again. Now, overall, we are, again, in a range. So the lows, 41.75 up to 42 and 39.75, and the highs being 50.5 up to 52, and a large chunk of resistance. It almost looks like they built a ceiling up here at 55.5. If we can get a correction, of course, I would love to sell high to get that move down, but we're in the lows, we're in the bottom of a range. This is the area that a lot of buyers may want to come in and to try to shove the market back up. Now, both for the Nasdaq and the S&P, a lot of times when you get that kind of movement where you have a big line in the sand, right? We're looking at that big level, bottom of the range in this case. The market comes down to it, tries to ping off it, gets the move a little bit, and then trips, right? That then turns into an area of resistance. So for that longer term sell, if we are looking for selling pressure, that's what I would want to see for a move back down. So definitely able to play it on both sides. At the moment, potentially looking for short-term buying pressure, but if it gives up, very quickly shifting over to the sell side. So that's going to do it for the overall analysis going into tomorrow's price action. Looking at the news, we do have a little bit to work with. There's some early morning news out of Euro for Germany, specifically, the German manufacturing PMI. And then we go into 8:30 news for the U.S. session. Core durable goods orders forecast at 0.5%. The previous was flat at 0. And then we also have some Canadian news at 8:30 tomorrow for the core CPI. The previous was 0.5% on that. So not a ton of news going into tomorrow's price action, which may be a blessing in disguise given all of the other stuff that's going on this week. A lot of traders may be kind of thankful to not see too much going on for tomorrow. But either way, like we always say, make the plan, trade the plan, follow those rules, and you will be A-okay. Until next time, we'll see y'all later.